La 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 la.
So we are on tape right now. It's Johnny Strider. I'm with Jim Davidson. He's managing director of Elder Capital. Just a few things I know about him is he knows a lot about computers and security and space travel and crypto anarchism and all kinds of interesting topics. So I hope we can get into some of those. We started out talking about the security of video streaming applications, and before I started the tape, and we were talking about the Around app, and Jim was explaining to me how he had investigated that, and I found that pretty interesting. I wonder if you wouldn't mind how you analyzed Around and what conclusions you came to, and what video apps you're
Sure.
more comfortable using.
Okay, cool. I did want to mention everybody says Elder Capital, and then everyone looks for ELDER. It's not that. It's Eldar, which is the race of elves in the J.R.R. Tolkien novels. So ELDARCAPITAL.com gives people a bio on me and on Gavin Elsie, who works with me, and I think there's still a bio on Kevin Wilkerson, who works with us on our tech stuff. So I have been in technology since 1978, technology in the sense that people use the term now. Before that, I was mostly just drawing pretty pictures in crayon on fanfold computer paper my dad would bring home. And sometimes I would read the equations on the other side and get into the Fortran coding a
The
bit.
old Fortran printouts, yes. I'm old enough to remember those.
Yeah. And you had to remember to have, like, I want to say 11 empty spaces at the beginning of every line, but I could be wrong about the number. It was format specific because a lot of it was still Admiral Hopper. You would put the cards in the hopper, and then the hopper would
That's right.
read through the cards, and punch cards were still a thing. International Business Machines made a lot of money with the punch card.
Those punch card machines were pretty cool. I had one when I went to the University of Washington and studied engineering. So that was 77, 78, about the time when you were drawing on the printouts with crayons.
I was just transitioning then. I actually sent my first email in 8. So it was right around then that I was getting into being a my dad had his PhD dissertation from the University of California in Berkeley in 1949. Got his PhD, and it was all on stacks of punch cards. And I know this because in 2010, after he passed away, I was helping clean up the house, and under the bed there was a box, and the box was clearly labeled dissertation. And we opened up the box, and there was his dissertation. There was not a word printed on a paper. It was all these cards. So
those were just the cards for his dissertation, I gather.
Because he was able to write the program to prove the things mathematically, and he wanted to keep this as, like, because if you've ever done computer programming, there's a lot of stress involved in getting the code right and making sure that this is the stack of cards that will actually compile and will actually, we will have runtime code if we use this stack of cards. If we use a different stack of cards, not so much.
Oh yes, I
and
remember
don't drop
2 a.m. in the computer lab at the university saying, "Why won't this program run?" Just trying to find that one little comma or whatever it is that's out of place.
Yeah. This was before we had a lot of developer tools, and this is before Ruby on Rails or whatever it is that people are using lately. But so what I did with Around.co is I looked up their GitHub. I looked at the open source parts of their code, And it's pretty clear that it's a lot of Python library, and that's fine. Python's a great language for different types of purposes, but it did not appear to me that anything was encrypted. It did not appear to me that there was any body of code that was specific to a round that wasn't being used in other Python code applications. And so it didn't seem like it was a completely open source project. And then I looked at a lot of the, I do a lot of IP address research. So I looked at their domain name and who it was registered through and how it is based on Amazon AWS. So Amazon Web Service. I guess if you say Amazon enough times, the Amazon rainforest will appear in your living room. I don't know if you're familiar with the Call of Cthulhu, but it was a role-playing game 50 years ago, and if you said Cthulhu's name often enough, Cthulhu would appear and rip your head off. So
That's right.
um,
I once went to a Cthulhu film festival, and it was a lot of fun.
uh, that sounds dramatically scary. I love it. H.P. Lovecraft was a very strange man. So anyway, so I looked at who these people were. It's two developers who were living and working in Russia, and suddenly in 2012, I think everyone in the deep state became clear that they were going to do this change of government in Ukraine and try to push NATO all the way into Ukraine. And it was stressful for people in Russia who were working with the West. And so these guys left Russia in 2012, and their offices are in Amsterdam and San Francisco. And there's nothing especially wrong with that, but it kind of gave me a deep state vibe. And the lack of complete open source disclosure means that I don't really know what it's doing. And that leads me to the problem of giving an app permission to use my camera and microphone. Because if the app can do that when the app is loaded, the app can do that when the app is a terminated but stayed resident thing. Which means
Yes.
as soon as I've ever used the app, it can have code that puts a long-term object on my device that says, and by the way, we can turn on the camera because we have permission.
Can I ask a
And I
question
don't
there?
agree with that.
Can I ask a question there? So on my Android phone, when I'm giving permission for an app, it says, "Would you like to give a permission while using the app or anytime?" Do you trust that?
Correct.
Do you trust that kind of limitation?
No. I mean, I believe that the people who wrote the Android code were sincere in their intention that that be um, a limited permission. And that, well, for instance, Google Maps, for a very long time on this phone, if Google Maps wanted to use my GPS antenna, I would give it permission for this time only, right? And then the next time I opened up Google Maps, it would have to ask permission again. And it just stopped doing that one day. Um, after an Android update, the system updated, and that permission had morphed, had changed. And now Google Maps doesn't ask whether it can use my GPS receiver. It just does it. And I've gotten over the whole question of, is the phone safe? It's not. This is an Android phone. It's using, we happen to be using Signal, which I have actually had a look at a good code audit on the Signal open source code. And Signal Foundation is probably mostly doing the right things. But, with a name like Moxie Marling Spike, you have to think that it might be a pseudonym.
Well, that one
And
went over my head. Moxie Marlin
you don't
Spike.
know who
No.
Moxie Marling Spike is the I don't know, he's a cryptocurrency multimillionaire and is the personality behind Signal. And so the Signal Foundation has a bunch of people who are arguably CIA, NSA, FBI, MI6, Mossad people. And you can trust them if you want. I like the code, and the code has been because it's open source. The code has been used by other developers. Howie Hursty was using it when we were working together on Zip Tonight in 2016. And Session is developed basically on the same code base as Signal.
Is that Sessions?
But
Sessions.com, I think it is. I've used an app called Sessions with an S at the end. Or is that a
no,
different?
this does not have an F at the end. This is it's a black background with a giant green S, and it's Session, and it's probably on the App Store, or you can roll your own. I don't know their website because I've been using the web for a long time, and I have way too many web addresses memorized.
Yeah.
But Session is not connected to your phone number, and it's not connected to your email address. In order for you to start a session with someone else, you have to actually have the code. In 1996, there was a guy named Neil Stevenson, and Time Magazine published a short story of his called "The Great Somalian Caper." I don't know if you ever saw that.
That one I have not read.
Okay, well, I'll tell you the story. It's pretty brief, and spoiler alert.
Yeah, right.
You,
Okay. The Great
you
Somalian
shouldn't,
Caper
shouldn't
by Neil Stevenson. A very entertaining author,
right.
especially for computer nerds. People
If
love him.
if you yes, well, for good reasons. I mean, he conceived of the metaverse before people called it the metaverse. He actually called it the metaverse. And then Zuckerberg scraped the serial numbers off and called it Meta. But in the Great Somalian Caper, which is on Web Archive. So if you don't like going to the Time Magazine site, which I don't blame you, you can go to Wikipedia and find the link to the Web Archive version of the Great Somalian Caper. In it, he talks about a group of crypto anarchists who decide that they want to help a new cryptocurrency called, well, it's not really a cryptocurrency. It's an e-money. It's a web money. It's like PayPal or that Russian thing, web money, or well, there've been 40 or 50 of them, beans and flues and other digital currencies. And there's going to be a Super Bowl event, and they have a bunch of people who have been supposedly randomly selected to appear on the at halftime on the field at the Super Bowl, and they're all going to be given $1 million worth of simoleons, and the deep state has corrupted the process and wants the selectees to all be people who will waste the money and fail to thrive with it and not be able to spend it anywhere good and spend it all on drugs and liquor and gambling.
Mm-hmm.
And make the company look bad so that nobody adopts this digital currency so that the deep state can roll out its own.
So the digital currency is called simoleons.
Simoleons is the name, right?
Is
And
was
the
that
guy
original
who
to the story? I'm just wondering what's the origin of simoleons. Was that something Neil Stevenson invented, or does that rest on an earlier foundation?
I think you would need to go to something like etymology.com and look it up, because it is a 1930s word, at least, maybe 1920s. And
Yeah, I've heard it
people have
in
been
old movies. Yeah, now that you mention it. Yeah,
right.
yeah, okay.
And so he was just using it as a word for money that wasn't dollars. So the PR guy who is in charge of this Super Bowl thing has decided to task his younger brother, who knows math and art, with calculating the number of jelly beans that would fit into Soldiers Field in Chicago, and then the same calculation for the Meadowlands in New Jersey and a bunch of other stadiums, with the idea that the people who have an exact match for the number that his brother calculates will be a random selection. But his brother knows that the computer facilities that he's been offered at the home of his brother are not secure, and so he just does the calculations using the standard interface with the internet to figure out the numbers, and then he emails it to his brother and says, "Here's the numbers you wanted." But meanwhile, the deep state has purloined those exact numbers and has given them to certain people, and so it's not going to be a random selection.
Okay.
And the brother who knows math takes a break and goes into the metaverse, where because Neil Stevenson is still pushing that button, and he is approached by a sloth who comes up to him and says, "Hey, you need to understand that there's a problem, and the key is under the doormat." And the sloth disappears and goes away, and he logs out of the metaverse and thinks about this experience, and he says, "Okay, so there's something wrong. I need to do something. Where is this key under the doormat?" So he actually opens up the door of the place where he's staying and lifts up the doormat, and there's a piece of paper. And on the piece of paper is a encryption key. So it's hexadecimal,
Mm-hmm.
the numbers 0 through 9 plus A through F. And it's it's a long code broken up into groups of 4. And so he types this in, and suddenly he has a secure connection with the same computer he's been using. And because he knows where to type it and how to
Right.
access this.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's guided to give a whole new set of answers that are close, but not the exact same answers. And so it's a bunch of crypto anarchists who take the field at the Super Bowl, and they get the simoleons and they cash them out as crypto bucks, and then the cryptocurrency revolution happens. And this is portrayed in a story, so it's a short story, it's fiction, and it's 1996, and it's actually in Time magazine, which is kind of
Wow.
staggering.
Wow. Yeah. So Bitcoin came out in 2008 or 9, if I remember right, or 3.
So those of us who were involved at the time remember it as October of 2008 that the white paper was published and the Genesis block was mined in January of 2009.
Yeah.
And in the original discussions of the Bitcoin white paper, the online personality known as Satoshi Nakamoto referred to the eGold problem. And a lot of us talked about the eGold problem in 2008 because it was a problem. And the problem of eGold was that in 1995, Doug Jackson and Barry Downey invented eGold and deployed it on the web. And you could buy and sell things with digital warehouse receipts for gold. And if you wanted to, you could redeem your gold for coins, gold coins that were stored in Melbourne, Florida, really in a desk at Doug Jackson's office. Doug
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
an oncologist at the time, and he became deeply enmeshed in this whole development of an online gold based currency. And you could bail in. If you had a gold coin, you could send it, and it would be evaluated by their assessor. And then, if it were properly a gold coin and not gold coated tungsten, they would bail it in, and then it would appear as so many milligrams of gold in the eGold system. And in 2000, there was a revision. So 5 years on, they revised the rules a little bit to make a few things more orderly, because they were having concerns about everyone knowing that the gold was in their offices. So they moved the gold to secure storage in
Mm-hmm.
Zurich, Dubai, and London,
Mm-hmm.
mostly London,
Mm-hmm.
where they had 400-ounce bars. London Good Delivery Bars is the term. And there was a list with serial numbers and exact weights in ounces, Troy, and that was the basis of eGold. And so then, instead of being able to bail in your own gold, you would have to move a bar into their secure storage. And I actually did this. We had a lot of success with this starting in 2001. And in 2004, I sent a friend of mine, John Kyle, to Zurich. Um, he went to the Pecunix gold storage facility at Anglo-Irish Bank in Zurich, withdrew. We had a lot of Pecunix at the time, so he withdrew an entire bar according to all of the terms of the agreement. And then he went to the gold money storage facility and bailed it into gold money. Um, and that was, at that time, we were interested in the competitors because we trusted eGold and everyone had been using it for a long time. And it was beginning to have exponential growth.
Mm-hmm.
And I began writing industry reports about this, which appeared at indomitus.net back when that was still an active domain. It's all on the web archive, of course. And there were somewhere on the order of $50 billion of transactions in the year 2006 in eGold, buying and selling, moving things in and out. A friend of mine, JP May, developed a site called, I want to say it was Banana Gold, which would allow you to buy anything on the Amazon.com website and pay with eGold. And he had a commercial account with Amazon, so he could resell for them. And they would drop ship to whatever addresses he gave. And they gave him 45-day credit terms. So he was making bank not only on charging a fee for this service, but also I was like 1% or something. But he was also over the period of time, Gordon Brown sold the Bank of England's gold, well, sold half of it at the very bottom of the market to $169 an ounce in 1999, September 99. You can look it up.
What? Wow,
Um,
that's amazing.
And so everybody was watching the price of gold go up all from 1999 all the way up till today. The price of gold has done nothing but rise because the Federal Reserve does nothing but print money and tell people that they aren't suffering enough.
Yeah, and not
And
only the Federal Reserve,
then
every central bank around the world,
all
right?
the central banks are of one mind, yes,
Yeah.
and their one mind is Luciferian Satan worship. And Janet Yellen and Joe Biden will get on television and say that there is no inflation and it's the best economy ever, Jack. And I guess the hoax stream media feels obligated to carry this as a story as if there were any truth to it. But inflation is real. We now have 2,430, I think, today is the price of an ounce of gold, which is tragic because when the Federal Reserve was created in 1913, it was 20. $20 would get you an ounce of gold up until FDR decided to screw the country into the wall in 1935, and it went to $35 an
Yes,
ounce.
yes. But let's get back to eGold, and then we'll circle back to around where we started this journey.
That sounds good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So eGold was destroyed in April of 2007. The FBI came and accused them of having a bunch of Iran-based IP addresses with accounts, which a lot of us strongly believe were opened at CIA safe houses
Okay.
in Tehran. But
Was there
you
some
know,
kind of sanctions against Iran or something that made it,
there was
quote
sanctions
unquote
at the
legal
time.
to do something there?
Correct. So
Yeah.
it was illegal. It
Mm-hmm.
was illegal to allow such accounts to exist on the eGold system, and their servers were in the United States, and their gold was in identified secure depositories, and um, and we were all very upset. At that time, crypto anarchists, for the most part, met on the Anarplex in a place called the Agora. Agora is Greek for marketplace. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
there was an Agora in ancient Athens. I'm sure Plato and Socrates all knew how to get there. And we had an online chat. I'm pretty sure that there are still archives somewhere of those chats. And I was Planetary Jim on that network. And the problem was that Doug Jackson and Barry Downey were accused of felonies, and the eGold system was closed, the gold was seized, and in 2011, all of this was settled out of court basically without anybody spending any prison time. And we were all told that we could apply to um, OmniPay, was the name of their in-house exchange,
Mm-hmm.
and we could tell them the name of our account and our account number and how much of this gold, and they would convert it to dollars at that 2011 price and send it to us in a check.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've ever been in possession of a bank balance for 4 years that you can't access, you kind of give up. You kind of like build your life around something else, and you don't expect to use that money.
Yeah.
And that's what happened to eGold. And there were tens of millions of dollars of gold in secure storage that were seized, and there were thousands, probably tens of thousands of individual businesses all over the world that were destroyed.
Yeah.
And I think at the time there were something like 5 million accounts, and we worked out how many of those accounts only had dust because they were receiving fees. They had been created to receive fees. Because if you created an account and then somebody used your referral link to create their account, then you got a little fee off of every transaction they made.
Okay.
So there were a lot of, well, we called them dust accounts, and when we normalized for that, there were about 2 million people using eGold at the time that it was
Wow.
destroyed.
2 million people, and most of that money then is still, and that gold, that physical gold rather, I should say, is still in the hands of the FBI. Then would you say, or while?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
God actually has promised us eternal salvation, and that
Mm-hmm.
was purchased for us through the suffering of Jesus Christ. And it was purchased for all souls, so that it's not just us. If you look at the Great Commission, Jesus says that we should go out into the world, the whole world, not just this planet, and that we should teach the gospel to every creature, and those who believe may be baptized.
Mm-hmm.
It's the exact words. And I looked this up. I looked for the translation because creature sounds odd to our ear. We're thinking person or human or man. Man used to be the generic for our kind of being. Um, in Navajo, it would be Dene, the people.
Mm-hmm.
People who are actually people are Dene, and everyone else is like something else. You guys are
The
weird.
other, yeah, the
The
foreigner.
othering, yeah,
Yeah.
othering is something that humans do a lot of. But it actually says creature, and that's interesting because it suggests that Jesus is saying any creature that has language,
Oh, awesome. So
because we're
I'll have
supposed.
to look that up. I hadn't noticed that before, but that's an interesting observation about. So that
And
would
so when
be
we go
one
out
of the
into
gospels. But anyway, go on.
no, I think it's consistent across the different gospels where the Great Commission is mentioned. The problem with the gospels, of course, is that each one of them is a little different. So you have to figure out. There are women who show up at the tomb after at on the day of resurrection. but the list of which women they are is different in the
Yeah,
different
as you would
gospels.
expect for sort of organic testimony by different witnesses, right? You would expect some differences. I've always thought if there were no
Right.
inconsistencies at all, it would seem that they're artificial testimonies because nothing,
Yeah.
yeah, there's nothing is
Right.
perfectly.
And so getting back to Ralph Merkel, he's at the time he seemed like a late middle age professor type, very learned and knowledgeable and patient, and then to go from there to how many people could have written the white paper. I think only one person really did, but I was involved in a lot of discussion groups where it was talked about, and nobody wanted to admit it because that was another one of the problems.
Mm-hmm.
And the problems that Bitcoin solves are one, it's not all on one server, it's distributed.
Mm-hmm.
And anybody can download the complete Bitcoin blockchain and have every transaction. It's like going into your local Walmart and getting a receipt for your purchases that day, which includes all of the receipts that have ever been issued by that Walmart or any Walmart, going all the way back to 1955 or whenever Sam Walton opened the first store. You have all the receipts. And so that's very powerful because it means that there is a public ledger that cannot be corrupted. No one can say, well, that transaction that, where we sold the MDs to Saddam Hussein in the 1980s. Well,
Yeah,
don't talk about that.
right.
Erase that from the record, and
There's
then
no
you can't.
memory hole. There's no memory hole in the
The
blockchain.
block the blockchain is forever, and that's fundamental. So the server problem, the eGold problem breaks down like this: the servers were seized, so then no one could do business. Okay, you can't seize all of the servers in the world without shutting down the entire computer industry and making people very sad because they can't. Well, we just watched CrowdStrike do that, right? They shut down a whole bunch of Microsoft systems and made
Yes.
people very sad all day,
Yeah, and all the
all
systems
day.
of control that all the moneyed Luciferic interests want to keep running wouldn't work either without the internet.
It's sort of
Yeah.
like, here's what a central bank digital currency will do to your life if you allow them. Yeah.
Yeah.
So so that was one problem, and Bitcoin solved that part of the eagle problem. The other problem is central storage, which is to say that all of the value is in gold and it's in vaults, and there are three of them: London, Dubai, and Zurich. And if you go to each of those countries, there is a process. It's not an easy process in Zurich, but it is a process. You can get a warrant that says that Interpol has identified a violation of American law that is being prosecuted by appropriate parties, and there will be a Swiss court that will eventually say, yeah, okay, you can go ahead and seize property from this bank. And then you've got the Zurich.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing is true of Dubai. It's not a perfect tax haven, but it's kind of taxi haven
Mm-hmm.
ish.
Mm-hmm.
And London are they're just horse. They'll just roll over for anybody. And there's no security with secure storage. It's centralized so it can be stolen, and Bitcoin solves that problem, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because Bitcoin's storage is imputed in the existence of a chain of blocks, and the block mining process created the coins,
Yeah.
and the block
There's
transaction processing
there's no physical
established
asset.
the form.
There's no physical asset, which a lot of people have
Well,
trouble
there kind
with.
of is, though.
Mm-hmm.
In a sense, there is a physical asset because the physical asset is computing power. So there are servers all over the world that have these ASIC chips that will do hash calculations really fast, and their software is designed to specifically do hash calculations faster than anything else. And there's power, there's electric power that goes into running those calculations. So there is a physical aspect to Bitcoin. It is not just it's in the ether, man. It's out there.
Yeah.
No, it's a real thing. You have to actually have servers, and if you don't have servers and you don't have the ability to generate electricity, you really don't have Bitcoin. You have paper storage coins, and you have offline, ledger nano devices. But if there's never going to ever again be a place to plug those in, then that value is kind of out of reach for a
Right.
while,
Right.
until people put servers back online.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the second problem. But the third problem of the eGold problem, and it's a really big problem, is that Doug Jackson was a guy in Melbourne, Florida, and Barry Downey was a lawyer in Maryland, and they got arrested.
Yeah.
They got perp walk and stuff. I
Yeah.
mean, and if people, if members of your audience have been arrested, it's not a pleasant process. And nobody wanted that. And that's why Satoshi Nakamoto is obviously a euphemism, a pseudonym. And you can pick out what meanings you want from the Japanese for Satoshi and for Nakamoto. And no one admits to being that person. I don't believe Patrick Wright is that person, but
And
that's controversial.
you don't believe this somebody working in the CIA is that person either?
Well, for one thing, the CIA wouldn't be charged with this. That would be NSA, the
Yeah.
National Security Agency.
Okay. Yeah. But
But no, I
the deep
don't. I
state.
don't think it is. I don't think it is because there were a lot of discussions about how to pile things up. Once the white paper was written, there was a lot of code to write before the Genesis block could be mined. And if you look at how that code was talked about and organized and put together and then changed, it's been changed a lot. There were changes in 2016 and 2017 which really altered the nature of transaction processing. And bunch of us wanted to be able to process a lot more,
Mm-hmm.
and the block size was not extended to do that. And so there were Lightning networks and a lot of other adaptations to deal with this. But Bitcoin, if it were going to become a central bank digital currency, it would have Visa-like transaction speed. And Visa 5 years ago was doing, I want to say, 44,000 transactions a second.
Mm-hmm.
And Bitcoin will never do that. Bitcoin, you get a new block every 10 minutes, right? I mean, 6 an hour, 6 blocks of transactions. And however many transactions you can force fit into that is however many transactions you get. But it's not a high-speed system. And if you can imagine you're in line in a grocery store and you want to pay for your groceries, and you actually using Bitcoin as a transaction at that cash register, you have to wait until the block resolves, and everybody in line has to wait, and people aren't going to be happy about that.
Right. So it's not designed to be a central bank digital currency, is what you're saying? Because for
It's
that
not.
reason.
It's really bad for that, because central bank digital currencies want to be able to not only alter the past and say, well, we didn't sell Saddam Hussein those chemical weapons that he used on the Kurds and the Iranians, so that transaction disappears. Blockchain won't let you do that, and you also can't really say, well, that address doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
You can't spend money to that person because they violated our rules, and they're a bad person.
Yep.
Um, and the central banks want to do that. They want to say that you can't spend money with people who sell ammo, because why? Then you'll go out and have a gun with ammo, and we can't have that. They want to actually make it illegal to sell guns in this country. The Democratic Party in California is sure that this is the answer to everything, and they want to make it possible to sue manufacturers of guns for any violence that is done with that same gun. And at the same time, they don't think that that's going to be applicable to cars or electric power. And you run into a lot of problems if people can't make stuff without being criminally liable for accidents and injuries and deliberate
Yeah.
events.
I guess we got to make our own knives, our own steak knives. Right.
Well, I don't know that we have to. I mean, right now, we just have to make sure that people understand that the government is consensual fiction. there is no the government, right? Um, this is something that they talk about in the film The Matrix. There is no spoon. There is only your understanding of reality. Um,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'm with you there.
and government is just people like us. They're
Mhm.
lawyers and entrepreneurs, and mostly they're lawyers and Karens and people who want to busybodies who want to get into other people's business.
Yeah.
But we allow them to carry guns if they have a uniform, right? The soldiers and the police get to carry guns. But supposedly, at least in England, that's no longer okay. People aren't allowed to carry guns. If someone's doing violence to people in their neighborhood, they can't have any tool for self defense. And that seems wrong. That's
Hmm.
anti biblical. Jesus says that you should sell your cloak and go buy arms because you have to defend your flock. And he's telling his disciples to do this because it's
Right.
part of
Well, it's
the
in
nature of reality.
original California Constitution, and it's still there. But there's a right to self-defense. It's spelled out expressly.
Yeah, yeah. And so we have this exceptionalism concept that people in government are allowed to have powers that no one else is allowed to have. Because depriving you of your right to life through killing is something that they do with soldiers and police all the time. Depriving you of your right to self-defense is something they do when they red flag you because there's a restraining order that somebody has put against you. You might not even know it exists as a restraining order, but it's been put against you, and so they red flag you and they go take your guns. Well, that's not actually a power that anyone has. Taking away your property is theft. Taxation is theft. And no one can delegate that to other people. I can't delegate a power to steal to anyone because I don't have that power. That's not a proper thing. I can't delegate my right to steal because there is no right to steal. There is only the contest of force. And the problem with that is, an eye for an eye, and we all end up blind.
Yes. So getting back to crypto, let's see, we've been going at this for about 42 minutes, just so you know. So, which cryptocurrencies do you like the most, and why?
Well, I think that the top 100 are the place to be for the most part. If a cryptocurrency doesn't have on the order of $1 billion worth of market cap, and you can go to like coinmarketcap.com and get the list. It changes a little bit every day, but the top two are Bitcoin BTC and Ethereum ETH. And then there are some other Bitcoins further down the list in the top 100. Bitcoin Gold and Bitcoin SVG. I don't know. You can look it up.
Hmm.
Um, you won't go very far wrong by having one of those because you can always convert it to one of the others. And you will find that there are a lot of marketplaces where you can buy them and sell them for fiat currencies. That's good because we still have a legacy banking system and we need to be able to move value into and out of it and out of stocks and bonds and things.
Hmm.
Um, the ones besides Bitcoin and Ethereum that I really like include Monero, which has a lot of privacy features. And I also really like Pirate Coin. And I also like Zcash, again, for the same reasons that there are privacy features.
Hmm.
There is a new technology that I've been made aware of called Enshroud, which has a set of protocols for making it much more difficult to track Ethereum virtual machine based transactions. So Ethereum has smart contracts written in a code language called Solidity, and there are other Ethereum like entities like EOS and Near and Neo and several others. And they have their own version of the Ethereum virtual machine. And they have, in some cases, they're just using C or C. And in other cases, they have their own code that's like Solidity, but it's not Ethereum's Solidity. And with Enshroud, you can use anything that is an Ethereum virtual machine compliant token.
Mm-hmm.
Like ERC20 tokens would all work. Tron TRC20 tokens would all work.
Mm-hmm.
And you enshroud the transaction information so that the only people who know what that transaction was about are the ones who have the key specifically generated for that transaction. And you use a pooling mechanism, which is done to make it difficult to say, where did these tokens come from? Well, they came from a pool, and thousands of people put money into that pool in various currencies, and so it could be from any of them, and we don't know.
Yes.
Um,
Is
and
is
it
that
also solves the
is that a separate, or so that stands between the say, let's say you're recording transactions on Ethereum. So in Shroud, does that sort of sit between the Ethereum blockchain and
no.
the wallets that are interacting with that blockchain, or
Oh,
how does
yes,
that yeah.
yes, that would be more correct. Yes, Ethereum sits between the wallet operator and the Ethereum virtual machine operator, and it creates a non-fungible token for transaction identification. And the tokens, the Enshroud tokens, can be minted by anyone who has access to an Ethereum, who has access to an MVO, which is a Enshroud um, server. But you create an account and you convert your Ethereum to Enshroud tokens, and then you use those tokens to mint these NFTs, and then you can spend them, and then you can burn them, so that if you don't want to keep receipts about what transactions you've done, you can make them go away. And anyone can operate these MVOs to do this Enshroud activity, and it's all open source. It's all GitHub code. You can download the white paper from enshroud.info. You have to turn off secure SSL only. Browsers won't like going to it because all of the papers are on HTTP only.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of reasons for that. Certificate authorities are issued by certain parties, and there's identification, there's a tracking through certificate authorities. And certificate authorities aren't all that secure anyway, because um, the government can make a certificate authority issue a duplicate cert, and then they can do a man in the
Okay.
middle attack where they.
So to protect
So
the creators of Enshroud, it's using HTTP technology, is what I'm getting from that.
for the white
Yeah.
paper and other stuff, and there's a whole series of tutorials that are being composed for that, which should appear on the site fairly soon to help people understand how to do these transactions. But the function of Enshroud is to make it harder to detect what has happened, because the transaction descriptions are hidden through private keys, and the source and destination of funds is obscured by using the pooling, and it's open source, and anyone can build their own MVO and monetize it as they see fit. So it's not it again. The intention is to defeat the things that we all call the eGold problem: central storage, central computing, and centralized people. Um, if anybody can do it, then it's no longer possible to just arrest. I mean, I guess they could arrest everybody who knows how to code, but that would slow the economy down quite a bit.
Yes. Well, that's
And
really
they would need
interesting.
rooms.
Yeah,
They would need
I learned a
rooms for
lot.
people. And we used to think that was a problem. You remember before 2020, people would say, well, they can't arrest everybody who doesn't file taxes because that's 125 million people. But then in 2020, they did this experiment, and Trump was very, very persuasive and convinced people to lock themselves in their homes for 2 weeks. And if they weren't an essential worker, if they couldn't prove they were essential workers, they wouldn't be allowed out of their home. Everybody in the country was under house arrest.
They had practice for this. It wasn't just Trump was just kind of a tool that they seized upon, but there's a whole establishment that had practiced for this for years. Bill Gates was
Oh, I
heavily
agree.
involved
And
with, and yeah,
all of the revelations since then are really spectacular because I've been telling people for years it doesn't matter who you vote for, they aren't going to let you vote your way to freedom. And now we know that the primary voters for the Democrats aren't going to get the person they voted for. They voted for Biden. They may not have felt good about it, but they were told to vote for Biden, so they went and they voted for Biden, and now they're not getting Biden, right?
yeah,
And 4,000 troops were just sent to the Middle East, right? The United States is sending 4,000 troops because, I don't know, Beirut is in flames and the American embassy in Beirut was just attacked today. And what else? Israel is feeling like there's too many missiles coming at us. We need Americans to stand underneath them.
yeah.
So please send us some Americans. And the
That's a
president didn't
whole
send them.
nother. That would be a great topic for another session. I think
Yeah.
is like
What I'm
the
saying
end
though
of the
is that
world, space travel, apocalypse, and all that. I think that would be you'd be a great guest for that. But I do want to get back to around because we'd left it where there was these sort of these dissidents, I guess Russian type dissidents who weren't comfortable with the whole
I
new
don't
approach of
know
the
that they were for
West.
the
Or
CIA.
yeah,
I don't know that they were CIA operatives and
yeah,
they refugeed out of Moscow in 2012. I don't know that.
yeah,
I couldn't be sure about that, but that was the smell of all
yeah,
of the news stories
yeah.
about them. And then they sold it to a venture capital company like 2 years ago, and it's a big tech Silicon Valley business.
Okay,
And I don't want to put things on my phone that I don't know I can trust.
yeah.
And um,
And they're
and
they're
there's
they're giving away a lot for free, so that's always suspicious. You don't know what their sort of end game is there, but it
oh well,
probably
sure you do.
involves selling your data, right? Or
Selling your data is for sure everything
mhm.
in big tech is selling your data to the Mossad and to the NSA and the FBI and the CIA and MI6 and GCHQ. But the other thing is that you know that eventually they will find a way to monetize it with subscriptions.
Mhm.
You'll have to pay for your account. They will also find a way to put ads because
Mhm.
even though, you know, I don't pay for WhatsApp, I get ads to groups on WhatsApp all the time. And it turns out they're selling some service or some
Yeah, what's the use of surveilling you, Jim, if they can't send you ads to tempt you into buying what they would like you to buy?
and you know that there is always free food in a mousetrap, which is why you don't get your fingers trapped because you know that you're not supposed to grab the trap. And sometimes the mice are able to work this out too. Um,
What were some of
the
the
other
other
thing
warning
is,
signs there with when you looked into around? What were some of the other warning signs besides the originators, the creators? Did you
well,
notice anything else?
it was looking at GitHub. I looked at their code base, and it has Python libraries in the code base, which is fine, and that is open source and very nice. But I didn't find a whole lot of the modules that do things like, you know, server interactions. And if I don't know what my device is sending to their server, I don't want to give my device permission to send video and audio to their
Well,
server because I don't know when it will be off. When
so
will
this
it be
sounds
off?
like
I don't.
false advertising to me, or mislead. So how can they say they're open source if they haven't put all their code out there, you know, in the open? If
Well,
they're holding back key parts of it, then they're not open
I
source, right?
I'm going to shock you here, I know, but there is a thing called the Federal Trade Commission, which monitors the use in trade and commerce of, you know, advertising words, and they do a really lousy job of enforcement. They just pretty much don't enforce anything unless there's a lot of complaints. So, you know, my reading of the GitHub was that these Python libraries were the open source part, and not everything was disclosed. I looked for the disclosures. I didn't find them. I'm a fallible human being. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not saying that they're lying, but I am saying that I didn't find the code that I thought was going to be there, and that to me indicates that this software could be doing things that I don't know, and I am skittish about trusting yet another thing. Like I said, I use WhatsApp, I use Zoom, and I know they're doing creepy stuff. So I'm not saying that people should never use Around. I'm saying that it's not for me.
Okay, fair enough. Um, One of the things you mentioned too before we started recording was you looked when you're trying to, and I forget which company we were talking about, but you mentioned that you looked at the cap table, and I think this relates to your experience with Eldar Capital. Um, and I thought, well, that's an interesting tidbit there. Where
Well,
do you
right.
find
So,
these? Where do you find these cap tables, and what sorts of interesting things have you learned from them, and how do you suggest people might use them?
so Edgar is the Securities and Exchange Commission site, EDGAR, and if you just type in SEC Edgar, your search engine will take you right to it, and then you can type in the name of any company that has um, filed anything, and that can be a privately traded company, like Ziptonite was privately traded, but they announced that they were um, accepting private investments from funds, and the SEC in 2017 had them file a paper about that. Um, Otherwise, if you want to know how much my oldest brother made while he was working at Citigroup between 2009 and 2016, all of that is on Edgar. It's in a form called a 10Q, and it lists the name of the directors and officers in the C-suite. So, chief information. He was chief compliance officer, um, chief technology officer, chief executive officer, chief financial officer. All of that information for every publicly traded company is required to be disclosed, and it's disclosed in a 10Q, and you have to update that, I believe, quarterly if it changes, and annually you have to file a whole new one.
Mm-hmm.
So that gives you a lot of information about who is involved and what they're being paid. But then you also have the cap table, which is the shareholders and how many shares each of them own. And that's important because if these people on the board of directors are purporting to have your best interests as a shareholder at heart, and they don't own any of the company, then you have no reason to believe that they're going to do the right thing with your shares. They're going to issue more shares because they want to, and they're going to have the company do things with your money and not make a profit off of it. And that's a problem with some publicly traded companies on the pink sheets, especially.
Mm-hmm.
They will raise money on the pink sheets being over the counter, publicly traded, but not listed on a major exchange. And yellow sheets are bonds for the same type of thing. So the pink and yellow sheets are used to raise capital, and that money is used by a company that is completely private or is planning to go public, and you have no control over it. And you look at the disclosures, even if they're a fully reporting company, you look at their disclosures and you're like, well, you're borrowing money and paying it back in shares of stock in this company, but you're actually using that money for operations for this thing over here. And yeah, I've been following this stuff for a long time. I was given some shares when I was a teenager by my dad, and so I began following General Tire in the 70s. Um, I've been doing cryptography since 1992. I've been doing space stuff since arguably 1977 when I joined the L5 Society. Professionally, since 1986 when I began working with Deke Slate and Net Space Services. So, I'm really old, and I've been doing all of these things, and and I remember how I found out things.
Mm-hmm.
So in debate, in high school, we had a thing called debate. You probably heard about it. You're a lawyer, so you might have even
Oh,
taken debate.
of course, yes.
And cross-ex debate, they are always constantly asking you, well, how do you know? How do you know this fact that you show them the debate card? It's
Hmm.
the quote is written out in the person's name, and then they say, well, but who is that? That's some guy with a PhD. I have some other guy with a PhD who says the opposite. So who do we believe? And that's a valid question.
Hmm.
So
That's pretty much how litigation works too, at least civil litigation. Your expert against
statistics
mine.
are statistics are a way of muddying the waters. And there's a famous quote that statistics are like a bikini bathing suit. What they reveal is interesting, but what they conceal is vital. And
Yeah, figures don't lie, but liars sure can figure. Is
that's
the
right. And you will find this in Lying with Statistics. It's like a textbook. You can go to a business school and actually check it out at the business school library. How to Lie with Statistics. I don't know who the author is, but the point is that when I have had the experience of looking things up, like I would be interested in knowing who owns Zoom, and I think it's publicly traded. So I would go to Edgar and I would do a search on their site, and I would get access to all of the filings, and then I would look through those filings for the cap table, which should be in the annual report, and it should be in a couple of other places, 10Q forms, 10Ks, and then I would go through the cap table and I would say, oh well, see, in QTEL, that's the CIA. The CIA has formed this, and DARPA, is a major participant in that, and they own 10 million shares. I'm just making those things up right now.
hmm
NQ12 is a real thing. The CIA and the FBI and NSA are real things, but I don't know if they own 10 million shares of Zoom or not. You'd
right.
have to actually look at it more.
Understood. It's an example, but that a lot of
Yeah,
times you'd find it would be large pension funds that own most of the shares. The biggest
you do.
chunks.
You
Right.
find that, and you also what is it called? CalWorks, Cal something or other,
hmm
CalPERS,
Cal Perks, I think.
and then
Yeah.
yeah, CalPERS is one of the pension funds for the California communists who work for the government, and then
Public
there's one for
Employees
Illinois.
Retirement System, maybe something like that.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure all of these words mean something.
Yeah.
And then the other one is institutional investors. The Endowment Association of Rice University is like $6 billion, and that was 1995. It's probably a lot more now. Harvard, Yale, Columbia, Princeton, Stanford, all of these big universities have huge investment funds, and if you are a highly valued technology stock, like the Magnificent Seven, I think they call them now. For a while, it was FANG, which was Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. And then it became Magma. I remember it became Magma because they changed the names of some of them. Microsoft, Amazon, Apple. I don't know. There's a whole bunch of them.
Does this mean that
Um,
the directors for the large public companies are going to be picked by the institutions as a rule?
some of them,
Yeah.
some of them certainly are, and the the institutional funds will have enough shares that they will basically get to nominate directors and then with their shares vote. And they do deals where I will give you a proxy to represent my shares as long as you
hmm
put me on your board of directors.
hmm
And there's a lot of games that are played to make it. Um, when you look at a lot of this stuff, you find that publicly traded companies, because it's a walled garden, to be listed on exchanges, a lot of them have to have certain connections, and they have people in finance, and they have people in technology, and they are interlocking. And it's not always clear how the interlock works, because it's not just the same people on all the companies. That's 19th century trusting, busting. No, now they have people who are related to each other and who have other business or personal interests. And so you find, certain certain names show up, and then you say, "Oh yeah, but Patrice Friedman works for Peter Thiel, and Mark Jaffe and Peter Thiel used to, eat at the restaurants together," and you have to ask yourself, well, is there a connection there? And I don't know. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, maybe there is, maybe there isn't.
Mm-hmm. Okay. No, that's kind of an interesting review of how to do research into any publicly traded U.S. corporation. Um,
Right, and the way to do it for privately traded companies is you just look at their website and then you ask if you can find out more about investing, and they will send you all kinds of information. Because privately traded doesn't mean there is no information. It just means that it's not listed on an exchange. So you have to just ask, and most companies, especially legit companies, will eagerly send you information and tell you who else is involved.
hmm. Okay. Well, we've been at it for an hour. We could keep going, or we could call it a day for now. Is there anything else you'd like to put into this
Well,
recording for posterity, so to
I think
speak?
we should probably talk about other topics another time. I need to go do some things, but I appreciate it very much, John.
Yeah, I'd love to hear about the space travel and the end of the world, and so I'll make a mental note that to get you back on sometime to. I know you wrote a
And
book. You
the
wrote a
lunar
book
path
sort of about a
travel.
final apocalyptic kind of battle, which I don't know if you've published that, but I saw a draft a while back, and it was pretty interesting.
Oh, Freedom Decentral, Free the Slaves. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
actually part of a series. Yeah, why don't we do this again? Maybe next week if you're available, or I don't know how often you do these.
Oh, as often as I can. So yeah, we'll figure out a time and do it again.
Maybe a few days from now. Then. All right,
Yeah.
sounds great.
All right.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Have a good
Bye.
afternoon. Bye.
La 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 la.